Okay, so there is a video that I want to react to. It's a video by another Nick. That's the name of the channel. I'm about to take you to it right now. It's a video on where he ranks every single X-Men movie, which I'm very curious about. And as you already know, I'm a big fan of X-Men, and I'm a big fan of the X-Men movies as well. Obviously, it was pretty mixed overall now that we look back at it in retrospect. But you know, I'm definitely am curious to see how this guy ranks the every X-Men movie. Very, very curious. His opinions might be different from mine, which is totally fine. But otherwise, let's give it a fair shot, shall we? What's up, Sonic Brony? Come to me, my X-Men.
Now that Deadpool and Wolverine has finally released, the original Fox X-Men series has come to an end, completing the 24-year-old saga. This series can best be summed up as mixed, with some movies being fantastic while others are not so much. So I'm going to rank each of the 14 X-Men films on this tier list and find out which ones are trash, and find out which ones are some of the best comic book movies of all time. And I'm going to start where this series began.
Oh, this blooper.
The original X-Men is okay. It's not bad. It's probably one of the most forgettable films in the entire franchise, at least to me. When I was a kid, I didn't really watch this movie too much. I watched another, much better X-Men movie that I have a lot more nostalgia for. But this first film is a serviceable introduction to this world. The main storyline is really basic. On one side, it's a fish out of water story, where Wolverine and Rogue are introduced to the X-Men and join the team and find a place for themselves. And on the other side is the main plot of the film, where
okay, hang on. I don't mean to pause or anything, but what's up with the... I get this is probably part of his thing, but... why is it a chef with a... Looks like a dolphin mask? The hell's up with... I don't know, it just seems so random to me.
Film where Magneto is preparing an electromagnetic
And there's Robert Kelly
doohickey that will mutate all the humans in the world. Both of these stories are fine, but not extraordinary. Also, Magneto's plan relies on him knowing what Rogue's powers are and how they work, which doesn't make any sense. Professor X doesn't even really know what her powers are until she touches Logan and heals herself. So it doesn't really make sense that Magneto would know what she can do and send Sabretooth to get her at the beginning of the movie. But at least Magneto and the Brotherhood are cool. The opening scene of a young Eric during the Holocaust is haunting and really effective at setting up who Magneto would become. And Ian McKellen's performance is a real standout. He really captures that magnetic gravitas of the character. You see what I did there?
I agree.
Magnetic. I also like Sabretooth.
That was a good pun, but yeah, I do agree with that. Ian McKellen most certainly is, he's arguably the greatest Magneto that we've ever seen, but you also got to give it up to Michael Fassbender, who I'm pretty sure he's going to get to later on in this video. He was amazing. Gordon Ramsay with a dolphin head. And that's why I was like, what the hell? I was like, it has a dolphin head on. I'm like, that's so goofy. It's so random.
As the big bad secondary villain. Toad is a lot of fun. He does a cool little dance. And Mystique is iconic. Her reveal in Senator Kelly's helicopter is so memorable. But on
Rebecca
the other side,
Romaine.
the X-Men aren't as developed. Storm, Jean, and Cyclops are kind of boring in this movie. The film is more concerned with making sure the audience knows who these characters are and what their powers are, so they don't get a ton of character development. But Storm does have a
that right there is, I don't mean to keep pausing a lot. I'm sorry. I'll definitely make sure he finishes before I go in and say something. But I just want to say that honestly, what he just said is exactly my main problem with the X-Men live action movies is that, you know, and this is coming from someone who is a big Wolverine fan. Like, he's my favorite Marvel character, obviously, you know, but my thing is that my problem with the Fox movies is that they focus very little on the entire X-Men. They never really showed a lot of love to Aurora Monroe, Scott Summers, Jean Grey, not even Warren Worthington III, who was, of course was Archangel in the comics. You know, he was one of the original X-Men. You know, he's not really there. You know, Kitty Pryde was only relegated to being a cameo before she became a main character in the later X-Men movies. But yeah, I think I do hope that because the X-Men are back home at Marvel where they belong, I would hope that the MCU gives them a proper, more comic accurate representation of X-Men, because like in the if you're familiar with the comic book material, they're so multi-layered. They're so awesome, dude. Scott Summers, I don't care what anyone says, one of the best protagonists that you could have, like, easily. So is Aurora Monroe, aka Storm. She is amazing. If Scott isn't there, Storm is usually leading X-Men. and she was the one who trained Kitty Pryde on top of that. So she's very integral to the comics. X-Men, welcome to die.
Cool moment where she kills Toad with one of the most memorable lines of all time.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
It's so funny. It's part genius and part dumber than a sack of potatoes. Patrick Stewart as Professor X is just as iconic as Ian McKellen's Magneto. These two go together like PB&J. You can't praise one without the other. And I think Patrick Stewart does a really good job capturing the essence of this really caring teacher figure. But Wolverine is really the standout of this movie. Hugh Jackman as Logan is one of the greatest comic book castings of all time. And it's kind of crazy to remember that he was almost played by Russell Crowe. But Jackman really gives his all to this character, especially in this first film. He really captures that feral, animalistic side of Logan, and he has a well-crafted character arc of growing closer to Rogue and the other X-Men and finding a place to call home. He stops living his life alone and is now with people who are like him. It's not mind-blowing or anything, but it works. Also, since this movie is from 2000, it hasn't aged all that well. There are a bunch of special effects shots that look rough.
What the hell is even that?
But the action scenes themselves are really well crafted. Wolverine's fight with Mystique is an all-timer, and his fight with Sabretooth on top of the Statue of Liberty is equally as memorable. Especially
absolutely.
Yeah, that slaps. The original X-Men movie is fine, but it doesn't really stand out too much. I just find it kind of boring, and I never really go back to rewatch it. So I'm going to put X-Men in C tier.
Okay, that's pretty fair. I will say this. It's like the first X-Men movie was, what's up, little one Noana, and Jade Cargill's favorite X-Men is Storm. Understandably, Storm is just awesome. But anyway, I can see why he would put X-Men the first movie as a C tier level movie, because it's like the only thing that movie did was just introduce many of the characters, and it really focused on the dynamic between Logan and Anna, who, as you already know, Anna Marie is Rogue. So it's like, and honestly, that's not really a bad thing, because it gives it its own unique spin. Although it would have been better had they put Remy LeBeau in it, because obviously he has a strong bond with Anna in the comics, because as you already know, most people consider one of the greatest comic book couples of all time, Gambit and Rogue. Even so, it was like the only thing that this movie did was just introduce the universe to these characters and all that stuff. That's really all it did. It's a fine movie for what it is, but it's like, obviously the later movies were definitely way better. So I'd say him giving it a C tier rank, I think it's, I mean, me personally, I would give it a B, only because I don't think the movie is as boring as he makes it out to be, but I also don't fault him for putting it as C tier, because I think that's completely fair. I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. Just doing a stream to get my mind off of stuff.
Off. 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 Off.
Oh yeah, X2 is where it's at. This was one of the movies that made me a superhero
I
fan.
love this
When I was
movie.
a kid, it was this,
easily one of the
Spider-Man,
best.
and Ang Lee's Hulk. And I'm sure this movie didn't have any adverse effects on my mental development.
I love that part.
X2 immediately sets itself apart from the original film with its opening scene. Nightcrawler's attack on the White House is one of the greatest action sequences of all time. It's so kinetic, creative, and makes full use of the character's powers. And outside of Wolverine, Nightcrawler is by far my favorite X-Men. That's probably because of how cool he was and all the stuff I had growing up as a kid. He was insane in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. He is, of course, fantastic in this film, and he was my favorite character in X-Men Evolution, which is to this day my favorite X-Men cartoon. I even have this cool Nightcrawler print signed by Stephen E. Gordon, who designed the characters on that show. X2's story is almost impossibly good because it has so many different individual stories weaved together into one coherent narrative. There is the main plot where William Stryker captures Charles Xavier and tries to use him to kill all the mutants on Earth. There is a story where the X-Men and Magneto have to team up to stop him. There's also Magneto's own motives, which results in him trying to use Charles to kill all the humans. There's also the romance plotline between Rogue and Bobby where they can't make any physical contact. Pyro even has a story of his own of joining Magneto's Brotherhood. And there's even more
which happened in the comics.
Some of these stories are obviously not as well written or memorable as others. Like, I really don't care for Rogue and Iceman's romance problems. I just don't.
No one. I'm sorry, that dolphin mask is so silly. I like that Deadpool and Wolverine reference the Fox X-Men in the credits. Miss you. Thanks, Noana. But I will say, like, I agree with him though. Like, you know, Anna and Bobby's relationship, it was just like why? Because like nobody, I repeat, nobody ever bought into Iceman and Rogue being romantic with each other, because anyone who's familiar with the comic books would have preferred that Rogue had her romance with Gambit instead. I mean, after all, they both grew up in the same, they both grew up in the American South. They, you know, and they actually have quite a bit, you know, they've had their ups and downs in a relationship, and, you know, they have quite a bit in common and stuff. But honestly, though, both of them should have been, that's why Gambit should have been in the X-Men movies from the very start. Even Psylocke too. None of those characters ever appeared until much later, and he's likely gonna bring that up. Yeah, Remy and Rogue, they are Endgame. Exactly. Gambit and Rogue should have been the route that they took instead of taking it in this direction. That was like my only issue with X2, but otherwise X2 really is one of the best superhero films ever.
But every story feels like it has a place in the greater narrative. And I haven't even mentioned the best story in this movie, the Weapon X plotline. Wolverine gets so much development in this film. He starts out as a lone wolf who's focused on his past. He wants to know who he really is, what happened at Alkaline Lake, and where he got the adamantium in his bones from. But over the course of the movie, he learns that whatever life he had in his past isn't nearly as important as the life he has now. So he abandons his search for answers and solidifies himself as an X-Men. It's a really well told story that goes to some really dark places, but has a touching ending. And a lot of this,
all the more reason why X-Men Origins Wolverine was superfluous. All the more reason why we never needed X-Men Origins Wolverine, because everything we needed to know about Logan was all explained in X2. Like they went through the Weapon X thing. He has a whole arc where he's trying to find answers and everything like that, and then he comes to the realization that, you know what, whoever I was before doesn't matter, because I am at home. I'm surrounded by people who are just like me, and they understand me. So what I had before, who cares?
film works only because of its villain, William Stryker. There has never been a more vile villain in the X-Men series. His hatred for mutants knows no bounds, as we, the audience, see the different experiments he conducts on people like Wolverine, or Lady Deathstrike, or Nightcrawler, or worse, his own son. I like how the movie actually gives Stryker a reason for his hatred, but doesn't ever try to defend it. And Brian Cox is absolutely phenomenal. This is one of his most memorable performances. Also, the action scenes go incredibly hard.
Brian Cox does a great job.
But Logan's fight with Lady Deathstrike, the X
Lady Deathstrike was pretty cool.
The Alkaline Lake bunker are all well choreographed and extremely engaging, but nothing quite tops the assault on the X Mansion. This action set piece set the gold standard for Wolverine fights, and even though this movie is rated PG-13, this is still very brutal. I'll always remember Wolverine petting this guy to the fridge, or stabbing this soldier's foot, or the iconic jumping off the banister. Also, Colossus makes a cameo in this sequence, and I instinctively clapped. I don't know why I did that. I've seen this movie a million times, but I clapped. I will say though,
because he's awesome,
is a little meh. Both this movie and the previous film didn't focus on her too much, and it's kind of hard to feel anything during this scene. But I think all the performances in this scene are really great, especially James Marsden. So at least they saved this scene a bit. X2 X-Men United is a wonderful piece of superhero cinema, and it's always a joy to go back and rewatch. So I'm going to put X2 X-Men United in S tier.
Agree. I agree. As far as, yeah, I agree with him. I would probably give it an S tier too, because I think X2 was it was easily the best of the original trilogy, no doubt about it. That said though, I will say that his take as far as Jean Grey sacrificing herself and everything, I think that's totally fair, because again, the biggest issue that the X-Men movies suffered from was that they never really focused on the X-Men characters, like the entire cast as a whole. So what they did was that they just instead put all the focus on Wolverine, which, as much as I'm a Wolverine simp, I'll be honest with you, I would have loved it if all the other characters got the same respect. And that's mainly because I'm familiar with the comic book material which I highly recommend reading, honestly. And a lot, you know, Scott Summers, Jean Grey, you know, Warren Worthington, Kurt Wagner, you know what I mean? Obviously, Charles Xavier, you know what I mean? All these characters are fantastic in their own right. Even though Aurora Monroe wasn't an original X-Men, the fact that her influence on the team means so much just goes to show how, you know, how downplayed her role really was in the movies. And that's something a lot of people, including myself, didn't really take kindly to. But otherwise X2 was fantastic. That's a movie I still find myself going back to. Like the fight with Lady Deathstrike, the assault on the X Mansion, you know, Kurt Wagner attacking the White House. All that was great. And also Logan's character arc too, and his interactions with William Stryker was amazing. But it's also important to note that in the comics, it was Abraham Cornelius who was the founder of the Weapon X program, who's nowhere to be found in the movies, and he happens to be the one responsible for going through with the experimentation that he did on Wolverine, which led to him getting his adamantium skeleton. Although William Stryker was a character from the comics, it was Abraham Cornelius who was responsible for doing this to Wolverine, not William. But William Stryker was a part of the Weapon X program.
The most hated of all the X-Men movies, but honestly, I don't absolutely hate it. It has its problems,
me neither,
for sure, but it's not nearly the snooze fest that is the original film. The biggest issue with the movie is the fact that there are simply too many story elements that don't mesh together very well. Most notably, the Dark Phoenix story really has no place in this movie. It really feels like it was tacked on. Jean has almost nothing to do with the mutant cure plotline, even to the point where she's present for the final battle, but she doesn't do anything until the X-Men already won, and her inclusion absolutely tanks the pacing. I really want to know more about this mutant war that's coming, but the movie has to make time for the X-Men to find Jean at the lake and bring her back to the mansion, and for her to kill Professor X, and for Logan to go to the middle of the woods to get her back, etc, etc. The parts of the movie that really focus on her are so dissatisfying, and this story also heavily focuses on Logan's romance with Jean, which I hate. I haven't mentioned it until now, but I despise a love triangle between Logan, Jean, and Scott. Well, I guess in this movie it's not really a triangle, cause, you know. Logan and Jean have nothing to base this romance.
It's like they killed off Scott just so that they could have an excuse for Jean to basically interact with Logan and stuff. But I can see where he's coming from though, because you know, they really did downplay how important Scott and Jean's relationship is in favor of pairing her with Logan, which that also did happen in the comics. Like there were times where, you know, Logan got flirty with Jean and she kind of reciprocated in a way. But in the films, they just kind of straight up had her have an affair with him, and it was just like okay. Like come on now. But also the fact that they tried shoehorning in the Dark Phoenix saga, which honestly, the fact that they weren't even building up to it and it just happened is what this movie suffers from. It just happens. No build up to it. At least in the comics, there was the Phoenix arc, and then she became possessed by the Dark Phoenix, which is a more powerful, more corrupt version of the Phoenix, and you know, that's what led into that arc. But here, it's like there's really no build up. It just happens. You know what I'm saying? But yeah.
Romance off of, and seeing Wolverine being like, "Oh, I love you," stab, means absolutely nothing to me. But for how little the movie focuses on it, I do like the mutant cure storyline. One of the most memorable scenes of the movie is the one with a young Angel who is sawing at his back, trying to shave down his wings. Don't shave your wings down, little Angel. You're a beautiful peacock. You need to spread your wings and fly. But when his father walks in, he doesn't say, "Holy crap, what are you doing to yourself?" He just says, "Not you too." It's a really powerful scene that can show how hatred can blind people to actual issues. And that scene also makes for a good reason as to why Warren Worthington II even made this cure in the first place. And it's very interesting to see the different perspectives.
This is the only time Warren Worthington is seen.
Understandably upset and starts a race war. Logan and Storm are against it and continue to run the school, you know, when they're not dealing with exploding professor stuff. But other characters like Rogue want the cure. There's so much potential with with this conflict that the movie only scratches the surface of. But I will say, The Last Stand still succeeds in being an absolute blast. There are so many.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of great action scenes, and honestly, I wish the movie focused more on Scott and James' relationship, because honestly, most people don't give a lot of credit to James Marsden as Scott Summers. I thought he was great. I wish we got to see more of him, but it's such a shame, because it's such a shame that he didn't get a whole lot of material to work with, because I feel like if the movie focused more on Scott Summers and had him be treated like the son to Charles Xavier like he did in the comics, it would have made the audience like fall in love with him even more. And I hope that that's what they're gonna do with the MCU version of X-Men.
Many memorable action set pieces, like the Danger Room sequence, or the fight outside of Jean's house where Storm does some spinning. Hey, that's a good trick. Wolverine's Forest showdown with Bone Guy, and the whole final fight with X-Men against Magneto's forces is so incredibly done. This was the first X-Men movie I saw in theaters as a kid, and I still remember my first experience watching this fight. Colossus does a fastball special, Wolverine cuts this guy's arms off over and over, Beast goes absolutely ham, and who could forget the greatest line in maybe any movie ever?
Don't you know who I am?
Oh yeah, Vinnie Jones as Juggernaut.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
The action in this film
I love it. Having Vinnie Jones as Kane Marco. That's amazing. And then of course that's Ellen Page as Kitty Pryde.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
is truly remarkable, but if I had to single out the one
I'm the
greatest thing
Juggernaut,
about X-Men:
bitch!
The Last Stand, it would have to be Kelsey Grammer as Beast. I think this is a top-tier comic book casting. He's up there with Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds, and Robert Downey Jr. He has the perfect.
Wait a minute, hang
cast
on, let me
to
go back,
stand.
I'm sorry.
It would have to be Kelsey Grammer as Beast. I think this is a top-tier comic book casting. He's up there with Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds, and Robert Downey Jr. He has the perfect balance of Hank McCoy's kind but diplomatic side and his more animalistic Beast side. I could watch him fight
I agree.
for days. This is just so cool, especially when he's
I give credit to Nicholas Hoult for his portrayal as Beast, but I do agree with Nick on this one, which is that I do agree that Kelsey Grammer definitely was the best Hank McCoy. I agree.
spins on this pole. Woo! Yeah, X-Men: The Last Stand is not perfect, but it's a movie I still vibe with from time to time, so I'm going to put it in C tier.
I would put it down there too. I agree.
For as long as I could remember, I have had one least favorite movie of all time.
Well, X-Men Origins Wolverine?
More than any other, and that movie is X-Men
Yeah,
Origins
I know.
Wolverine.
Sorry, it's the dolphin.
Where to begin? First of
Oh,
all,
this
the
movie
was
is-
absolutely terrible, and just
This
about
movie
every
is
way.
dog
The
shit.
green screen, the CGI, the action scenes, everything. You can take any scene from this movie, and it
This movie is
probably
dog
looks
shit.
Terrible. All the action scenes either have this hyper fast cutting style where it's hard to make out what's happening, or they have that Zack Snyder slow-mo fast mode that just looks terrible. There's also some really funny cable work in this movie, like when Sabretooth
I will say that scene where Wolverine comes out of the water and stuff, and he's just screaming at the top of his lungs that war cry he gave and everything, and he escaped the Weapon X facility. That was the only cool part of the movie. That was the only cool part.
scales this building. If you're enjoying this video, and if you're not already subscribed, why not hit that subscribe button? We're getting really close to my goal of 10,000 subscribers, and it makes sure you never miss a new video from me. Now back to the video.
Y'all heard
the
him.
environments that these characters fight in looks
In fact, well, I don't know. This is the first time I'm seeing this content, so let me make sure.
super artificial, especially the final battle on the silo. Seriously, who looked at this and said, oh yeah, that's good to go? But you know what? Sometimes green screens aren't as good as they hoped. Sometimes action scenes don't come out the way the filmmakers envisioned. That's part of the filmmaking process, and those things can be forgiven. But something
Oh yeah, and the opening scene. The opening scene was pretty good too, where we see Logan as a kid.
that's part
Right here. Right here, where we see Logan as a kid, and he pops his claws out for the very first time when he sees his dad get murdered and everything. Well, his dad get murdered, but then he ends up rushing in a fit of rage, and then ends up killing the man who actually is his biological dad. And then he runs away, and then he isolates himself into the woods, and that pretty much sums up why he becomes a lone wolf.
the filmmaking process, and those things can be forgiven. But something I can't forgive are these god-awful CGI claws.
Oh yeah, don't even get me started.
the hell did they even do this? Why didn't they just use prop claws for Hugh Jackman to wear? Nowadays, you can buy them pretty cheap. So
I don't know.
back then, I'm sure they could have made a set for the film.
Yeah, look at how ugly. Look at how ugly the CGI look. Look at it.
Pretty cheap. So back
I
then,
agree.
I'm sure
Look
they
at that.
could-
Look. It looks so off. I don't like that. This was a movie from 2009. I can't believe I'm actually saying this. As dated as the first X-Men movie was, that had way better CGI than this. And that says a lot because that's an older movie. That's garbage.
have made a set for the film. Wow, guys, look at me. I now have better production value than a major motion picture, and it only cost me $20. The film's story is pretty flimsy. I think the main plot where Wolverine just wants to kill Victor and Stryker is mostly fine, but there are a bunch of twists and turns that are just unnecessary. Why is Wolverine's wife a double agent? Why does she have to be part
Silver
of Stryker's
Fox
scheme to give Wolverine the adamantium? And it doesn't actually add anything to the story. If Sabretooth did actually kill her, I'm sure Wolverine would have gotten the adamantium anyway, and the events of the movie would have played out the exact same way. And
that's a good point. That's actually a good point. Her involvement in being a double agent literally changed nothing to the story. The only thing that the writers were trying to do was try to put more weight on the situation. But the only thing that it did was just overcomplicated things than it needed to, because there was no need for Silver Fox to be a double agent, because the whole scenario, because even if she wasn't, the whole situation would have played out. It would have played out the exact same way. So there was no need for it.
By the end, she dies anyway, so what was the point of any of this?
Right.
Please, I'm so sorry.
Also, why are Wolverine and Sabretooth brothers now? They clearly weren't brothers in the first X-Men movie, and they aren't brothers in the comics. And them being brothers doesn't actually impact the film that much. They could have just been good friends or war buddies or something, and a lot of the side characters are just awful. Will.i.am's character is dumb as heck. Why did you think you
I don't
could
know
beat
why they
Sabretooth
made
by yourself?
Victor
Are you stupid?
and Logan brothers.
Congratulations. You played yourself.
So
The
stupid.
Blob is fine, but he presents a major tonal shift for this movie. This goofy boxing match is coming off the heels of those old people being brutally murdered, and it's very jarring. Seriously, those old people
I agree.
got messed up.
Fun fact, by the way, the dude who played the Blob, I forget his name, but the dude who played the Blob in this movie would also star alongside Hugh Jackman as the main villain in Real Steel. Remember that movie with the boxing robots? Yeah, that movie. I can't be the only one that remembers Real Steel, right?
Also, Gambit's in this movie. And then there's the big one. The thing everyone has made fun of in
Oh,
this
God,
movie.
no.
The thing future films in this series have even made fun of. Deadpool. What even is there to say about this version of Deadpool anymore? Terrible design, terrible use in the film. They took away his mouth, and by the end, he isn't even played by Ryan Reynolds anymore. By the end of the movie, he's
there was a
mostly played
version
by
of Wade
Scott
Wilson,
Adkins.
but it was
I
like
can go on and on about how terrible this film is, but the more I talk about it, the more brain cells I lose. I'm not even gonna put this movie in F tier. It belongs in a tier below F. So I'm putting X-Men Origins Wolverine in Hell tier.
I agree. I 100% agree with that ranking. No objections. That movie is, as my boy Captain Skyhawk would say, it's trash, garbage, dog shit. So, yeah, I agree with that.
Aiming for your spine.
Damn it!
Joe, I'm so sorry. I'm a terrible shot.
X-Men First Class is a solid X-Men
Why
film.
do you have Bonnie shooting Joe?
On par with some of the top tier films in this franchise, but it's far from the hell pit that is X-Men Origins Wolverine. For starters, I think the story works pretty well. It incorporates the origin of the X-Men team with these huge global events in a really interesting way. The CIA learns that a team of mutants are working with enemy countries and starting the next world war. So Moira McTaggart seeks out Charles Xavier and they assemble a mutant team of their own. This is a story that works for Charles, especially because he's an optimist and very eager to show the world that mutants can do good. The story also perfectly weaves in Magneto's origin. It's really cool how First Class extends the opening scene of the original X-Men movie and introduces Sebastian Shaw as the man who kills Magneto's mother and sends him down the path of vengeance.
Who, by the way, is played by Kevin Bacon, who does a fantastic job as Sebastian Shaw.
And the story actually has a really nice pace to it where we're slowly introduced to the state of the world, as well as the younger versions of Eric and Charles who are either partying or hunting down Nazis.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Wow, what a strange dichotomy. But this story works only because of how solid the villains are. The Hellfire Club are very formidable foes, and they're very different from previous enemies in this series. They inflict their will on others by secret intimidation. They command all sides of this global conflict, like how Emperor Palpatine controlled the Clone Wars and Star Wars. And Sebastian Shaw is maybe the most sinister villain in this series, and that's only because they never actually introduced Mr. Sinister. He's just this evil man who thinks he's superior to others. He's a simple villain.
I wish Mr. Sinister was in
Kevin Bacon is so
X-Men movies.
underappreciated in this role. He truly gives one of the best supervillain performances in this movie. It's also interesting how Shaw really is responsible for the creation of Magneto. At the end of the movie, when Magneto turns on Charles and the rest of the X-Men and plans to kill all the humans, it's the words of Shaw that he's speaking. But in one of the best shots of the movie, Magneto slowly pushes that Nazi coin through Shaw's skull because, while even though they fight on the same side,
You killed my mother.
the emotional heights of this movie are spectacular. I will say though, the rest of the
This is
songs
why
are not
Magneto's
as
one of the greatest
interesting.
villains
Emma
ever. He's
Frost,
so multi-layered.
Azazel, Riptide, and Angel are all pretty boring, and I'm clearly not the only one who thinks this because they all died in between movies. Oops. But the X-Men are much better. Banshee and Havoc don't get a ton in this movie, admittedly, and Darwin somehow dies.
The main problem that we have right now is we've got a problem.
I know everyone clowns on the character whose ability is not to die dying, but it really is just a laughably huge oversight. However, I do think Charles and Eric are pretty well developed. They have a really well-written friendship, and it's nice to see them form a bond with one another. And it's also really sad to watch them fight in the end when their ideals clash with one another, and when Eric accidentally paralyzes Charles. You can see the guilt on his face. I haven't mentioned it until now, but James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender are both fantastic as Professor X and Magneto, and they only get better in future installments.
I
will say,
100%
though,
agree.
I really don't like Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. She just feels like an entirely different character from the Rebecca Romijn version, even though, Rebecca Romijn makes a cameo.
Oh, by the way, lovely woman. Lovely woman. Anyway, I do agree with that. I think Rebecca Romijn is, and always will be the best Raven Darkholme. There's no other actress out there that can play Mystique better than Rebecca. That's not to say Jennifer Lawrence is terrible. Jennifer gives her own unique spin on Raven. But I always preferred Rebecca Romijn because her demeanor is very much on par with how Raven is in the comics. She's very much on par with how Mystique is portrayed. You know what I'm saying? That's why having Jennifer Lawrence was kind of questionable, but I appreciate the studio for at least trying to give a unique spin, but it's just like, it just takes away from the Mystique that we all knew and loved, and like from the first X-Men movie when she introduced herself when she was in that helicopter with Robert Kelly. You know what I'm saying?
In this movie. I also don't love how her story of becoming more comfortable with who she is results in her trying to get with a bunch of dudes. It's really awkward at times. The last thing I'll say about this movie is that there is a bunch of really bad, cringy dialogue, and these are just some of the ones I found.
Let's just say I'm Frankenstein's monster.
But I'd rather a bunch of guys stare at me with my clothes off than the way these ones stare at me.
Mutant and proud.
But yeah, X-Men First Class is still a solid film in this franchise.
They weren't that bad.
It has some really high highs, but some really low lows. So I'm going to put it in B tier.
Fair. That's fair. Wolverine after his healing factor was stolen.
Wolverine is yet again another solid entry in the Fox X-Men series.
Oh, yeah.
was the natural continuation for Wolverine as a character, and I think this setting is a refreshing change of pace. The film makes full use of the
Well, you have to understand too, because I'm not sure if this guy read the comics, but there was I think it was a 4-issue limited series in 1982 called Wolverine. It was the first comic book that Wolverine got to himself, and in it he goes to Japan where he where he gets better with his fighting ability and all that stuff. He ends up having a love interest and everything, and then he also battles Silver Samurai, but also in the mix, his lover. It's hard for me to remember her name right now off the top of my head because it's been a while since I've read it, but what I do remember though was that like his love interest was involved in a situation where her father's basically a piece of shit. And so Logan is, protecting her from him and all that stuff. And then on top of that, you have Silver Samurai, who's also thrown in, and he's kind of like, for lack of a better way of putting it, he's kind of fucking shit up. So Wolverine has to kind of like teach him a lesson or two, which for the record, Silver Samurai is in this movie, but I'm not going to say too much about it. I'll just let him say what he's got to say.
The setting by injecting some aspects of Japanese culture into the story, and we get to see a bunch of cool locations in Japan, like the Cube building, which sadly does not exist anymore. Logan's story is really well written. Well, mostly. Wolverine is unfortunately still upset about Jean's death and living in the woods because he's so broken up about it. He shuts himself off from the world and doesn't really have a reason to live. He
James
also
Mangold
loses his healing factor in the movie and struggles as a normal man, which gives this film some serious stakes.
Yep, this was the movie where he lost his healing factor, and that's what led into the events of Logan. But also, speaking of Logan, it was directed by the same man, James Mangold. So I'm glad to see that his story, at least Logan's storyline, was consistent when he, got his third solo movie.
But over the course of the movie, Logan begins to find a reason to go on and starts to see his healing factor and his life as a gift rather than a curse. But thankfully, he isn't completely held up on Jean. His romance with Mariko is surprisingly developed.
That was her name.
She's a well-rounded character with her own morals and problems, and we get many different scenes of these characters bonding and talking. These parts of the movie could have wound up boring, but thankfully they didn't. But the real highlight of the Wolverine is the action scenes. My oh my, did James Mangold cope with these
100% agree.
Scenes. They're all incredibly unique, stylized, and fit the tone of the movie.
That scene that Logan had, not only during this fight right here, that fight that he had on the bullet train, that shit was epic. Like that was like, it had my heart racing.
Except for the final fight. We'll talk about that in a second. The brawl at the funeral is incredibly chaotic, and it's cool to see all the different characters getting in on the action. The fight on the bullet train is very memorable. I will always remember Logan pulling this move.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Nice. Wolverine's dash through this town as he takes all the arrows is gorgeously shot, but my absolute favorite is his 1v1 with Hiroyuki Sanada's character. This whole scene is just perfection.
Oh yeah, that fight was amazing.
Beautiful to look at, but
that was arguably the best fight in the whole movie besides the bullet train.
I mentioned, the final fight kind of sucks, and really the entire
that's Silver Samurai.
Kind of felt meh to me. I really don't care for this film's main mystery, and I think the majority of the film is seriously lacking a main villain. The movie wants you to think that Viper or Hiroyuki Sanada are the main villains, but it's clearly neither of them, and the big reveal of the Silver Samurai being Yashida is a big who cares. We got one scene in this movie of him being like, Logan, give me your powers, and Logan's all like, no. And now here we are at the end of the movie. The old man is wearing a mech suit and drilling into Wolverine's claws, while a snake lady pulls her skin off in the other room. The whole last
I forgot about that part.
Is a huge tonal shift, and it's just way too goofy. But everything in the Wolverine before that was a pretty enjoyable watch, and I think a lot of this movie is still some of the best Wolverine content we've ever gotten. So I'm going to put the Wolverine in B tier.
That's fair. I would probably put it there too.
X-Men Days of Future Past is one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, and I'm
based, absolutely based. So far, I'm enjoying his. So far, I'm actually enjoying his tier list. I'm like, you know what? I'm probably gonna give you a sub. Why the hell not? Because you did say subscribe. I'll give him a sub. Why not? Let's support the guy. So far, I'm definitely enjoying his tier list. Because a lot of his rankings is probably where I would put them. And the fact that he said that Days of Future Past is one of the best superhero movies of all time, I'm like, yes, I love that movie so much. And I also read the comic, the original storyline I could talk all day about that story arc because I'm familiar with the comic book version and the movie version. In the comic book version, it was Kitty Pryde, and she goes back to 1980. Whereas in the movie, it's Wolverine, who ironically gets sent back into the past by Kitty Pryde, who was the protagonist in the comic book version, and he goes back to 1973. But instead of warning the entire X-Men, he tries to bring Eric and Charles back together and help prevent this catastrophe where Mystique, very similar to in the comics, he prevents Mystique from killing oh my gosh, I can't remember his name, Jesus Christ. Why can't I remember his name? The creator of the Sentinel program. You know, in the comic book version, it was Robert Kelly who got assassinated, who was in the first X-Men movie, but he died. He died in the first X-Men movie because of Magneto. But it was in the comic book version of in the movie version rather, it was Boulevard Trask. That was his name, Boulevard Trask, who was this creator of the Sentinel program, also in the comics. He was the one who ends up getting assassinated in the movie version, and that's what gave the green light to the Sentinel program that led to the annihilation of all mutants on Earth. What are you up to? Just reacted to a video before we game.
I'm like talking in the top 10. For starters, this film presents the highest stakes of the entire franchise. From the opening scene alone, we see how brutal this future is. The Sentinels killing new mutants as well as franchise staple characters like Iceman and Colossus instantly establishes them as some of the most intimidating villains ever. And they only get more frightening as the movie progresses. Seriously, I've seen this movie like a million times, but the last 20 minutes or so still give me so much anxiety. The movie even kills off characters who we previously thought were indestructible. I still remember watching Storm die for the first time. I was aghast in that theater.
Oh, no.
And as the
And this movie came out the same year as Captain America: The Winter Soldier. It was 2014. It was definitely a good year for superhero movies, that's for sure.
film cuts back and forth between the past and the future, the tension builds until the finale of the movie, where Raven's decision to kill Boulevard Trask or not decides if this dark future even happens. Days of Future Past really is a masterpiece in both editing and suspense. Also, the time travel elements of this movie are seamless, and unlike Avengers Endgame, it actually does make sense. Wolverine is sent back to change the past, which changes the future, and that's exactly what happens. It's as simple as that. There's no multiverse nonsense to overcomplicate things. It makes sense for Wolverine to be the one sent back, and it's really interesting to see how this now older and wiser Logan tries to convince young Charles and Eric to work together. And the adventure these characters go on in the past is incredibly well paced and full of memorable moments, like Logan's scuffle with Beast at the mansion, or Quicksilver breaking out Eric from the Pentagon, and the whole final showdown. And I especially want to highlight this final fight. It's our hero's desperate ploy to convince Mystique to not go down this dark path, to not kill Trask and greenlight the creation of the Sentinels. And the scene is heightened when Wolverine, the person who was sent back in the past to stop this, is thrown from the battlefield and can no longer change anything. And the only reason why Mystique decides to do the right thing is because Charles Xavier convinces her to. X-Men Days of Future Past only works this well because of how well written Charles Xavier's story is. If X-Men First Class is really X-Men Origins Magneto, then Days of Future Past is really X-Men Origins Professor X. Charles has such a beautiful arc of coming back from the darkest point of his life and finding that hope for the future that he once had. And it's so beautiful how his future self is the one who helps him, the one who teaches him a very important lesson.
Just because someone stumbles, loses their way, it doesn't mean they're lost forever.
And it's so impactful when Charles uses that lesson to help Raven at the end of the movie and show her a better path. A path of hope. This whole film is really the origin of the Charles Xavier we all know and love, and it's really powerful. Also, while I think all the performances in this movie are fantastic, James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart are the real standouts. They're both just so perfect. And even
I agree. As much as I'm a Wolverine guy, I gotta admit it, dude. I gotta tip my hat off to Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy. They were the real stars of this movie. I 100% agree. I have nothing to add to it. He pretty much hit the nail on the head as far as what makes this movie such a masterpiece.
Outside all the story elements, the film still works exceedingly well. It has gorgeous cinematography, fantastic set design, really great makeup effects, and phenomenal action sequences. This film also beautifully works as the finale to the original X-Men series. It almost brings a tear to my eye seeing all the X-Men from my childhood together and living happy lives. It's rare that the X-Men get a happy ending, and this film delivers a beautiful one. X-Men Days of Future Past is an absolutely beautiful film that delivers a heartful story, fantastic action sequences, a fun adventure, and the most X-Men story of any X-Men film. So I'm going to put it in S tier.
My man. So far, I'm actually enjoying his tier list. I mean, me personally, like, if it were up to me, I would probably put the first X-Men movie in B tier. But that's just me. Only because I do like that movie a little bit more than he does. But as far as putting X-Men first, I would probably bump X-Men First Class a little bit further up to A, because I do think it's actually way higher than a, not way higher, but definitely higher than a B, at least in my opinion. But even so, like, his list so far, pretty understandable. He hit the nail on the head with X-Men Days of Future Past. That's easily one of the best superhero movies ever made. If you haven't, I also highly recommend not only you watch this movie, but also read the original comics version, specifically Uncanny X-Men issues number 141 and 142. That's the Days of Future Past story arc, which takes place right after the Dark Phoenix saga, which is why Cyclops is not in it, because at the end of the Dark Phoenix saga, he steps away from the X-Men for a long time to process all of his emotions after losing Jean in the aftermath of Dark Phoenix. That being said, both stories are great, and I love the fact that the movie version, while making a few changes and changing the focus from Kitty Pryde to Wolverine, it happens, but it retains the heart and soul of the original story arc, which that's the whole point.
Deadpool freaking slaps. After Origins Wolverine, the general audience morale in this character was pretty low, but this movie changed that by telling a really solid romance story, having some impressive action.
This movie brought Deadpool into the mainstream and arguably was my introduction to Deadpool, because before this I wasn't familiar with him at all. Like, I heard something about him in X-Men Origins Wolverine and stuff, but this was before I was familiar with the movies. But when I saw the movie, I was really in love with his style. It got to a point where it practically inspired like one character that I used to have in my early YouTube days and stuff. So yeah, Deadpool, honestly, fantastic movie that honestly is still rewatchable today. Specifically the first one.
Sequences and bringing the character of Deadpool to life. At this point, we all know that Ryan Reynolds is fantastic as Deadpool, but he really excels in this movie. Of course, he delivers in the more comedic moments, but I don't think he gets enough credit for the more dramatic scenes in the film. In the parts where he's sad or in an intense amount of pain, Reynolds really sells the character's struggle. For all intents and purposes,
yeah, absolutely.
Ryan Reynolds becomes Wade Wilson. Also, the romance side of the story is really well developed. A lot of this movie focuses on the connection between Wade and Vanessa, and they're both genuine, well-rounded characters. A good amount of this movie is them talking and bonding and doing other things. And Morena Baccarin is...
Oh yeah, Morena Baccarin. Speaking of Morena Baccarin, she actually was originally supposed to come to Philly for, at the time it was called Wizard World Comic Con, now it's called Fan Expo. She was originally supposed to be there. But then she ended up, I think she had to cancel that appearance because her schedule was just too hectic, which is unfortunate. Had she been there, I would have loved to meet Morena Baccarin, because she definitely seems like a really sweet woman and stuff. And I personally would have given her props for her portrayal as Vanessa, but I probably also would have asked her if she would have ended up becoming Copycat too, because for those who don't know, Vanessa is Copycat in the comics. And even though Wade and Vanessa had a relationship in the comics, it definitely wasn't portrayed as seriously as it is here, which that's not a bad thing. It just only made Vanessa out to be more important than you let on.
very charismatic. It brings a lot of character to Vanessa, and you can really feel for both of these characters when Wade's cancer and disfiguration drove them apart. But really, the two things that made this movie as fun and enjoyable as it is are the comedy and action sequences. A lot of people might think the jokes and fourth wall breaks in this movie are cringe or whatever, but for me,
oh hell
they
no,
really work. And they're integral to Deadpool as a character because he uses humor to hide his true feelings, which is something the movie does a good job focusing on.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
And also, come on, Deadpool stapling Hugh Jackman's face to his own will never not be hilarious. All the action scenes are pretty awesome. The movie
I love that
full
part.
use of its R rating, showing all the impalements, dismemberments, and everything else I can't show on YouTube. The highway fight scene was a real standout, as was Wade's naked 1v1 with Ajax. And while some of the CGI didn't age well in the final fight, the choreography, stunts, and pacing were definitely there. And the end fight also has some real tension with Ajax taking Vanessa hostage. But speaking of Ajax, him and his whole crew are very underdeveloped. These villains are just super lame and not interesting at all. Ajax is just a guy
about
who
the
wants money, I think. I don't know. The movie didn't really explain why he wants to experiment on people and sell them. My guess is money. Also, Gina Carano is a secondary villain, which is rare because she's not really going to be in movies anymore. The X-Men are fine in this movie. Negasonic Teenage Warhead is a cool addition. A lot for action.
I do like Gina Carano, by the way.
I love Colossus though. I just think it's weird that he's a huge CGI guy now, and we never see him without the metal skin, which is weird. I mean, bro is.
Yeah, I don't mean to stop you because I notice I'm pausing a lot. I'm pretty sure someone's gonna flare me in the comments for doing this. But yeah, I will say this. That's definitely two problems that I have with the first Deadpool movie. First of all, Ajax as a villain is because he doesn't really have a whole motivation for why he does what he does besides just doing it for the money. But there's no end goal in sight for what he wants to do. He's just sort of there, right? And then you also have Colossus, aka Peter, I forget, sometimes I forget how to pronounce his last name, but you know, Peter's like, it's good to see him and all, but him being organic steel the entire time is kind of off-putting considering that he has the ability to transform his body into organic steel if he wanted to. It's like, if you want to forego his original uniform, that's fine. Because, I mean, even then, it still would have been cool to see. Hopefully, they give him back his original design from the comics and put it in the MCU. But they just had him, they just said fuck it and just made him steal the entire time, which I didn't like.
Eating cereal with his metal teeth. What is he doing? Did he take a Magic Spoon sponsorship or something? Like, what is this? So yeah, Deadpool has some minor flaws, but it's still pretty darn good. And it's probably one of the most rewatchable films in this entire series. So I'm going to put Deadpool in A tier.
Oh, you playing Minecraft?
I agree.
I like it, cut G.
X-Men Apocalypse is the longest X-Men movie to date, and boy, does it feel long. This film crams so much into its 2-hour and 20-minute runtime.
I'm pretty mixed. I mean, I'll let him finish, but I will say that X-Men Apocalypse is pretty mixed for me. It's like, it's okay. Like, it's not bad, but it's not good either. It's like, it's kind of in the middle. I did like seeing Olivia Munn as Psylocke, though, who, by the way, is a fan of the comic book material, by the way. And I personally thought she was a great Psylocke. I would actually be down if she came back again and everything. But yeah, and having Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse, some people may look at that and think that's a horrible casting choice and stuff, but Oscar Isaac is a fantastic actor, and I personally think he could have been an amazing Apocalypse. But I just hate how downplayed he is in this game. He has almost no character. He's just kind of like, he lacks personality and stuff. It's like, you know, you have a talented actor like Oscar, and yet the writers gave him almost nothing to work with. How do you take one of the greatest adversaries to the X-Men and then turn him into this cheesy, big, like, characterless villain who's just there? Like how?
time that it never really has the chance to breathe. The film has to reintroduce the new versions of Scott, Jean, and establish what Mystique is doing nowadays. His own little story with his family in Poland, and she's discovering each of the students have their own character. Charles Xavier has a story about trying to be the best teacher he can. Oh, and Apocalypse is also here. This film is so overblown with story elements that you feel like you're getting whiplash going from story to story to story. And because of that, none of these stories ever feel that interesting, and I couldn't really get invested. And some of these flat out just do not make any sense. I don't believe for 1 second that Magneto would willingly marry a human woman. That just
I know that was another thing. I was like, why is he? That completely goes against his philosophy of having mutant supremacy. His whole ideology is that humans are awful. Humans are what's wrong with this world. There needs to be a world where mutants thrive. But yet he marries a human woman. That completely like goes against his worldview. I'm actually glad he brought that up because I actually completely forgot about that. But I was like, yeah, it's just like, why? Why would you do that to him?
seems so out of character for him. Michael Fassbender does give a really fantastic performance.
But also, Wolverine does make a cameo in this movie where he's escaping from the Weapon X facility. And he does wear the actual Weapon X. Remember the Weapon X gear that he was wearing in the comics and stuff? He does wear that in his cameo in this movie, which is probably one of the only highlights.
Showcase of Magneto's wrath. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I do think Apocalypse is actually kind of cool. A lot of people don't like his design, but I don't know, I kind of mess with it. I'm not sure how you make a normal human being look like this otherwise, and he is absolutely terrifying in this movie, decapitating people with sand and sinking dudes into the floor. All his actions are downright terrifying. Although as a character he isn't the most compelling. He has a strong central motivation of wanting mutants to rule the world again, but outside of that he has no real character traits.
See, he's even saying exactly the same thing that I'm saying. You know what I mean? But it's like, I don't entirely disagree with him though. Like, it's like his powers are amazing. The costume's fine, I suppose. I mean, it's okay. But I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of mixed about it. But his powers are cool. But as a character, he's just so flat. It kind of did the same, it kind of suffers from the same problem that Ultron, that Age of Ultron had. It's like Ultron's he's a good villain, like a fantastic villain, especially in the comics and stuff. But the way he was portrayed in the movie was just downplayed, and it just really, it doesn't scratch the surface of what he's capable of. Same thing with Apocalypse, who is one of the strongest mutants in the world.
I do think Oscar Isaac is really underrated in this role. For what the character lacks in writing depth, Isaac tries his best to make Apocalypse a compelling villain. The rest of the cast, though, is pretty mixed. The returning cast members like James McAvoy, Nicholas Hoult, and Evan Peters all do a really solid job. Also, I think Cody Smith-McPhee is fantastic as Nightcrawler. He's so energetic and funny, and his line delivery is spot on.
I'm blue.
Ty Sheridan and Sophie
just like in the
Turner,
comics.
on the other hand, I don't like as much. It could be the writing or the direction they got on set, but they both feel kind of lifeless. They don't bring a ton of character or personability to their roles. Even though this movie is a bit of a slug to get through, I do think the more action-y scenes are pretty well done. Quicksilver's Sweet Dreams Are Made of This sequence is a fun, over-the-top sequel to his Time in the Bottle sequence in Days of Future Past. Wolverine's Weapon X cameo is better than the entirety of X-Men Origins Wolverine, and the huge final battle between the X-Men and the Horsemen of Apocalypse has some really cool moments. I especially love Beast's fight with Psylocke. It reminds me of Beast going absolutely ham in The Last Stand, and Magneto making that huge metal X goes incredibly hard, I can't lie. Also, after Jean kills Apocalypse using the Phoenix Force, the look on everyone's faces are so funny. They're all just like, yeah, I have no clue what that was about, but it's probably gonna be a big problem in a few years, and it's probably gonna make for a really bad movie. X-Men Apocalypse is not very good.
Yeah.
It has some good moments for sure, but it's just so dull and boring, and I don't think I'm gonna rewatch it anytime soon. So I'm gonna toss X-Men Apocalypse in D tier.
I hurt myself.
I feel so
Oh god, that was pretty good. Oh yes, if you guys want to know my favorite X-Men movie of all time, this one. I'm very curious to see what he thinks of Logan.
with Logan, because on one hand it does something I really don't like that kind of made me sour on the whole experience, but on the other it's an extremely well put together movie. This is the first time we had Wolverine in an R-rated project, and they made full use of that fact. Both Wolverine and X-23 tear up a bunch of dudes, and this movie is exceptional at creating some really high stakes, because you can really care about Logan and Laura and Charles and this family who gets absolutely obliterated, and a lot of the action in this film still holds up. I will always remember seeing Wolverine's rampage through the forest.
His berserker rage
phenomenal.
during the
fights
climax
between Wolverine and his clone are insanely brutal. Those in particular are incredibly suspenseful and really well choreographed. Also, the cross-country journey these characters go on feels like an old western, and I think that aspect of the story is really well paced. It doesn't linger in any
that was the direction James Mangold was taking Logan in. He wanted to, which is interesting how you can ground a superhero film in reality, right? But if there's one thing that he really did right with Logan, was that he grounded it so much so that you get to see the more, hence the title of the movie, you see the more human side of Logan, James Logan Howlett, the man who took the mantle of Wolverine. But here we see him as Logan, where he's working as a civilian, he's working as a limousine driver and everything to make ends meet, and because he's trying to retire with Charles Xavier and get a boat together and everything. Hence the title Logan. Simple but effective title. But then he learns that he actually has a daughter that was cloned out of his DNA in an experiment and stuff. And so now, and then there's all these mutant children who are basically being used as objects, literal child soldiers, to do their bidding and everything. And on top of that, the organization was trying to go after, Charles Xavier and try to eliminate him because his seizures caused a lot of catastrophes in the world. In fact, his seizures ended up with the death of the entire X-Men. So this film really is dark, and I appreciate it for having a much more unique spin than its contemporaries. Like, it definitely adopts a lot of old film elements, like I said, like a Western and all that stuff, which this movie references. It references Shane. There's a scene where when Logan, Charles, and Laura are in a hotel, Laura and Charles are watching Shane, the 1953 movie, which was one of the main inspirations of this movie, which James Mangold was very much a big fan of. So I appreciate this movie for giving it a unique spin, but also giving it a satisfying closure to Logan's character arc.
One location too long and feels like every part of the movie actually adds to the greater story. Also,
it's also basically The Last of Us.
Hugh Jackman delivers the best performance of the series, and maybe of his whole career in this movie. You can really feel the pain in his eyes, in his voice, and even in the way he moves, but he's still the Wolverine, and he still brings the ferocity when needed. Patrick Stewart also does a really good job as this older, not all there version of Charles Xavier. A big reason this movie is as sad as it is because of how tragic his performance is. It's heartbreaking to see Professor X like this for many reasons, including some I'll talk about in a little bit. And Daphne Keane is a real standout. She really delivers as a ferocious little demon child.
She was amazing.
Softer, quieter moments.
She's amazing.
Could have wound up terrible if the actress wasn't good enough, but Daphne Keane was more than good enough. And just in general, I think
and keep in mind, she was only 11 years old at the time when she was filming this movie. She gave it 110%. This was like her first major movie role, and she put her heart and soul into it. Her performance was like, I don't even know if calling it A tier or S tier would even remotely describe how amazing Daphne really was in this movie. She's amazing. Like, she's an extremely talented lady, very talented young lady. But as we're talking right now, I think she just recently turned 20. Yeah, can't believe it's been that long since Logan came out, right? She is 20 years old now, and she recently appeared in Deadpool and Wolverine, which I'm sure he's gonna get to later on.
23 is a very cool addition to this movie.
I would love to see her come back.
Student for Charles to teach, as well as one last mission for Logan, and she's now the future of mutant kind. I will say though, Dr. Rice, Donald Pierce, and the rest of the Reavers aren't that great of villains. They're intimidating enough, and the Wolverine clone I mentioned is scary as heck, but none of them really have any interesting character motivations or characteristics outside of Donald's southern charm. But while there's a lot,
I was gonna say, I mean, like the thing was that Donald, Donald Pierce was trying to get the children back and everything and use them as their subjects and everything. I mean, yeah, I do agree that like they didn't really flesh out what the end goal was, but it was very clear that they wanted to take all the mutant children and use them as soldiers. Like that was literally the whole point of it. So, yeah, I don't know how you failed to see that.
I love about this movie, there is one thing that really bothers me. I just really don't like this is the end of the original X-Men series. I don't like that all the X-Men are dead now. I don't like that Charles's last moments were reflecting on the fact that he accidentally killed people he loved. And I don't like that Wolverine couldn't keep that happy ending he had in Days of Future Past. When I think about the original X-Men series, I don't want to think about how most of the characters were killed off screen in some tragic accident. I want to think about them together as a team and as a family who are working towards the betterment of the world. But now, the original X-Men series ended with them all dead in the dirt.
And for the record, I'm not ashamed to admit this. When I actually saw this in the theaters when it first came out, this scene right here where Logan ends up dying in the arms of his daughter, who he protected at the very like he spent the whole movie. You got to keep in mind he spent the entire movie practically pushing her away and everything to avoid the. Logan's always like this in the comics. He often pushes people away to avoid having that feeling of losing people he cares about. Something that he even says in the film himself when he's in North Dakota and he's at the sanctuary with the rest of the mutant kids. He said, bad shit happens to people I care about. He was like, Charles never asked for this. Caliban never asked for this. And they're 6 feet under the ground. You know, he was trying to justify his reason for leaving Laura. And Laura obviously was very upset about Logan leaving her because she clearly wanted him to stay. But, you know, this was Logan kind of like pushing her away. But in the end, he ended up using whatever ounce of strength he had left to protect Laura. And he successfully did so, but it costed him his life. That's what made this death scene so incredibly sad. And I remember crying really hard when this scene happened. And on top of that, for a while, it was Hugh Jackman's final role as Wolverine, and damn it, it was such a poignant send off. And to what he said, you know, it's lame that we're seeing all of our favorite characters just dying, and then it's like you have all these new characters which would eventually get their love, no doubt, but it's just hard to move on when our favorite characters that we come to know for well over a decade is gone. I mean, this was essentially the Avengers Endgame of the X-Men franchise. When you really think about it, Logan's basically the Avengers Endgame of the original X-Men series, when you really think about it. Because after Logan, the X-Men movies just wasn't very good. Like, I'm going to be honest with you, the X-Men movies really, really dipped in quality after Logan. Well, maybe except for Deadpool 2, because Deadpool 2 was really good, which is the next movie he's going to be talking about.
And mutant kind all but extinct. So because of that, I can't love this movie, but I can acknowledge how well made it is. So I'm going to put Logan in A tier.
You know, hold on. Yeah, I'm just gonna say this right now. I'm gonna have to politely disagree with him as far as where he ranks Logan. He put Logan at A rank, and I just don't agree with that. That's an S rank movie. I thought he was gonna place it lower, but he gave it an A tier, so it's not as bad. But it's like I don't agree with that. That is an S tier movie. That is easily the best X-Men movie, period. So that's the only one where I actually have to say I politely yet strongly disagree with that. I strongly disagree with your placing of Logan at A tier. That's an S tier movie. That said, you have a right to your opinion. That's fine. I actually like the fact that it's someone who has a different view than what I have. I think these kinds of videos are more interesting to watch than those who just blindly agree with me, because then it makes for a more interesting conversation to be had.
This might be a hot take, but I actually think Deadpool 2 is better than the first film. It takes the themes and stories that the original film set up and expands on them. Most notably...
No. That's not a hot take. Most people would agree with you. Most people would agree with you that this was better than the first Deadpool movie. Like, I haven't heard an argument, not yet anyway, that Deadpool 2 is worse. Because let's see. You had Fire Fist in there, who was one of the New Mutants from the comics. Domino was in it, aka Nina Thurman. And then you also had Cable, aka Nathan Summers, who was played by Josh Brolin, who at the time was also playing Thanos in the Avengers movies. So yeah, and Deadpool himself even made a reference to that. He was like, "Zip it, Thanos," which, you know, that's typical of Deadpool to break the fourth wall like that. But yeah, this movie was arguably better than the first. But not by much. Like, I would say by a slight margin it surpasses it. I think both movies are fantastic, but Deadpool 2 was definitely better. But not by much, but still better.
Wade has to learn to live in the world without Vanessa. I think killing her early on really raises the stakes of the film and sets up an interesting conflict. And Deadpool has a really well-written story arc of finding a new family and trying to be the family that Russell never had. Additionally, Russell and the new characters are all welcome additions. Fire Fist is a very understandable antagonist-ish. He's definitely not a villain, but he probably is the main antagonist of the film. At least he is when Cable joins the main squad. He has a very understandable motivation. He never had a home or a family, so he listens to Juggernaut, who influences him to kill the headmaster. Cable and Domino are both really great additions. They're characters I think we've all wanted to see in live action, and they are both done superbly. The visualization.
I agree. Zazie Beetz doesn't get enough credit for her portrayal as Nina Thurman. I think she did a great job as Domino, me personally. It would be awesome to see these characters come back, because you got to also remember too, in the comics, Cable was the leader of the New Mutants. He debuted at the exact same time as Domino. It was New Mutants. I think it was issue number 81. I think it was the New Mutants. It was definitely like somewhere in the late 80s. But also, it just happens to be the exact same comic book line where Deadpool made his debut. In fact, he made his debut when Domino and Cable were running the New Mutants, and Deadpool made his first appearance in that comic, and in that comic he was a one-time villain, but then once you learn his motives and all that stuff, he went to be portrayed as an anti-hero, as the anti-hero mercenary from that point.
Of Domino's powers is a lot of fun. I don't think there's anyone who could capture Cable's grumpy, tough, old man energy quite like Josh Brolin. Also, that gun is sick as hell. Seriously, that thing has so much drip. And the brand new Juggernaut is mostly just a joke. The big CGI Jogs is cool. I don't think he matches the aura of the X3 Juggernaut. There's also
Vinny
X-Force.
Jones.
Never mind. But really, I think introducing a whole new team just to have them die off really quickly is pretty funny. I'm sorry if you're a Shatterstar fan, this probably really sucks for you. But just like the first Deadpool film, Deadpool 2 features some amazing action scenes and great comedy. I really can't say this film is funnier or not than the original. To me, they're pretty close, but I think Deadpool 2 has some of its own memorable, funny moments.
3 feet off the ground to snatch up the nearest muffin crumb?
Yeah, that I remember seeing that in the theaters.
Funny moments.
3 feet off the ground.
I remember seeing that in the theaters where we saw where they're in the X mansion, and then we see the cameo from the X-Men. We see Quicksilver, Beast, Nightcrawler, Cyclops, Charles Xavier. They're all there. I thought that was pretty cool.
To snatch up the nearest muffin crumb? Well, like Scoutmaster Kevin used to say, there's a first time for everything, son.
I'm gonna rip you in half now.
But the action sequences are much better than part 1. I enjoyed Tim
I
Miller's
agree.
direction in the first film, but
I
David
agree.
Leitch's action scenes are a whole other animal. There is so much directorial flair to these sequences, and they all feel very different from one another. The opening montage of
Marvel
Deadpool
is
taking
known for
criminals
having
is a
amazing
great
action
introduction
sequences
to this
most of the
series.
time,
The prison
anyway.
fight features a fantastic 1v1 between Deadpool and Cable. The convoy chase is exciting, and the final showdown is just a huge blast. Also, that Juggy fight is elevated by the fact that they composed a choir Juggernaut song. That is just beautiful. So yeah, I love Deadpool 2. It's the perfect continuation of the original movie and one of the best films in the franchise. The last thing I'll say on it though is that if you're going to rewatch this movie, I highly recommend the theatrical cut. I saw the extended cut for this rewatch and it wasn't as good. It was too long and a bunch of the deleted scenes were unnecessary. Go figure.
What is it?
It wasn't as good. It was highly recommend the theatrical cut. I saw the extended cut for this rewatch and it wasn't as good. It was too long and a bunch of the deleted scenes were unnecessary. Go figure. But still, I'm going to put Deadpool 2 in S tier.
Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. I disagree. I hate... Bro. As much as I love Deadpool 2, I'm sorry, I can't agree with that ranking. You're putting it above Logan. There is no way in hell that you can convince me that Deadpool 2 of all movies is better than Logan. I disagree with that. I would personally put Deadpool 2 in the exact same tier as the first Deadpool movie, but place it above it to show that it definitely surpasses the first movie, but by a slight margin. But they're otherwise in the same tier as each other because they're both very much rewatchable in the sense that you can still watch them and still feel that exact same level of excitement that you felt when you saw it the first time. Same way I feel about X2 and Days of Future Past. So far, I agree with his placement of X2 and X-Men Days of Future Past. And I also agree with him putting the Wolverine in B tier and Last Stand in C tier and Apocalypse in D tier and just giving the absolute worst rating to X-Men Origins Wolverine. Although, like I said, I don't give him too much flair for First Class in the first X-Men movie. I don't give him too much flair for that, so I'll let those slide. What I highly disagree with is putting Logan below Deadpool 2. In no way, shape, or form does Deadpool 2 surpass Logan. That is a bunch of pure, unadulterated, money-back, guaranteed, 5-star review on Amazon bullshit.
People say I am the best boss. They go, God, we've never worked in a place like this before. You're hilarious. I think that pretty much sums it up.
X-Men Dark Phoenix feels like a rights-retaining movie, which is ironic because this movie came out the same year that Fox was sold to Disney. And this is yet again a really bad adaptation of the Dark Phoenix saga. Jean goes up into...
Think about it. They tried doing it twice, and then what happens? They end up making it even worse than the first time. They had potential in the sense that they did the one thing that they failed to do the first time, which was to hint at the Phoenix arc, starting with X-Men Apocalypse. Kind of like how in the comics, you had some of the earlier Uncanny X-Men issues that built up to the Dark Phoenix saga and everything, where she was using the powers of the Phoenix only to be corrupted by it. But here, they still failed to do the entire story justice.
Space and absorbs the Phoenix energy, even though in Apocalypse it seems like she already had the Phoenix inside her, but whatever. And the rest of the film is just her doing crazier and crazier things while this group of aliens try to take the Phoenix Force from her. And that's pretty much all of Jean's character in this movie. She doesn't know what's going on, and then she flies up into space in the most visually appalling way possible. Seriously, if you showed a Victorian child this, they'd probably jump off a building or something. This is rough. They attempted a romance subplot between her and Cyclops, but that doesn't really get any development at all. It's
That right there really heavily disappointed me. The fact that you took two characters who have one of the most iconic relationships in the comics and you did not do it. This movie, it's like, I try not to give this movie too much flair because it was trying its best. Compared to X-Men Origins Wolverine, at least, it's like, that movie to me was still worse, but it's just like, this one just... I think both movies are equally dog shit for different reasons. One, X-Men Origins Wolverine was a movie that didn't need to happen. Secondly, Dark Phoenix was attempting, but just ended up failing to execute on all of them, downplaying quite literally everything, and making Jean's character arc so dull to the point where it's like I hardly remember anything besides her just doing a bunch of crazy shit. One crazy thing after another, and she goes crazy. She doesn't know what the hell's going on with herself, which is kind of similar to how it is in the comics, where Jean is kind of like having this internal conflict where she's unaware of what's going on with her powers, her body, and even her mind and all that stuff. So that aspect, they kind of got that right to a degree, but the rest of it is just so unmemorable. I can't even tell you one thing about this movie that I remember. I literally cannot tell you. This movie is so forgettable. It is so forgettable.
Kind of interesting when Scott threatens Magneto, but that's about it.
If you touch her, I will kill you.
Oh my stars.
And speaking of those aliens, these guys kind of suck. They were originally supposed to be Skrulls, and for all intents and purposes, they still are Skrulls. They're shape-shifting aliens whose planet was destroyed. But I guess officially they're the Dabari. And Jessica Chastain alien is such a lame antagonist.
The only reason they couldn't use the term Skrulls was because this came out the same year Captain Marvel came out, as well as Avengers Endgame. So there was almost no one was in the mood to see another X-Men movie, especially a god-awful interpretation of the Dark Phoenix saga. So because of the Captain Marvel movie, the Skrulls were there. So that's the reason why.
She has no personality or character, she's just kinda creepy and that's it. Also, this movie turns Charles Xavier into a terrible person. I know in the comics he's done some very questionable things, but I always like how in the movies they changed that. Both the Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy versions of the character were more empathetic, more caring. But for some reason, Charles in Dark Phoenix is an egotistical, selfish moron, seemingly out of nowhere, and everyone else is sort of acting out of character as well. The scene in New York where the X-Men and the Brotherhood are fighting each other is terrible. Why are X-Men now okay with putting innocent lives in danger? Why is Beast okay with harming his students, including trying to kill Jean? He has never been shown to be vengeful before. This movie's events just don't make sense with these characters. I do want to praise Nicholas Hoult though. He's solid as young Hank McCoy in these movies. I think he really shows the most range in this film. You can really.
And for the record, he recently played as Lex Luthor in the recent Superman movie, and he is by far the best Lex Luthor that you'll ever see. Like, Nicholas Hoult is just a great actor, period. And I do agree with him in the sense that he did a great job as playing the younger version of Hank McCoy. He's just a great actor overall, but there was only so much he can do with the material that he was given for this movie. But he tried his best.
Especially when Raven dies. Also, I think the final action set piece is a banger. This train fight is actually a lot of fun, and a bunch of the X-Men get moments to shine, like Beast going sicko mode, or Magneto using chunks of the train as weapons, or Nightcrawler tapping into his dark side, and using blades and snapping necks and teleporting aliens in front of a train. As a Nightcrawler fan, this was amazing to see and by far the best part of the movie. There are also a bunch of really silly and goofy things.
I thought it was
The new
pretty cool
X-Men
too.
Suits are terrible. We had some pretty good ones at the end of Apocalypse, but those got thrown out pretty fast. Also, you can tell that Jennifer Lawrence and Evan Peters wanted absolutely nothing to do with this movie. Both are completely removed at the same point in the film, Quicksilver being injured and Mystique being game ended, and the Mystique makeup is so laughably terrible. You can tell she was not going to spend hours in the makeup chair for another one of these movies, and now you must be.
Well, you have to understand, that's because Jennifer Lawrence has a terrible reaction to chemicals being rubbed all over her body, so to compensate for that, that's why she wore a bodysuit a lot of the times when she played Mystique, except for her first appearance, X-Men First Class. That was the only time Jennifer Lawrence had all that shit all over her body, but her skin didn't take kindly to it at all. Whereas Rebecca Romijn, on the other hand, she was totally fine with having her entire body painted from head to toe. But that just only proves my point as to why Rebecca is the best Mystique there is and always will be.
Thinking, well, there's a lot of bad stuff in this movie. Surely there has to be some decent dialogue, right?
And by the way, the women are always saving the men around here. You might want to think about changing the name to X-Women.
I forgot Raven said that. When I heard that, I just kind of sat there like, please keep that shit out of my superhero movies.
No, there isn't. Yeah, X-Men Dark Phoenix is a dumpster fire. That is sadly the finale of the second X-Men series. So I'm going to put X-Men Dark Phoenix in
F tier.
F tier.
Yeah, that's a fair placement. That's a fair placement. It's just so unmemorable. It's definitely not as bad as X-Men Origins Wolverine, but it's still a dog shit movie nonetheless.
Pinwheels in my head, voices, angry fish.
How's he doing?
Not good. He still thinks this is practice of some sort.
Did anyone
That pretty much sums up the New Mutants in a nutshell. It was basically a horror movie.
else see the New Mutants in theaters? Am I the only one? Even though the Fox era of X-Men was coming to a close, I was still excited for the New Mutants. I really enjoyed these characters both in the comics and other media like X-Men Evolution, but the New Mutants is it's not very good. I really wanted to like this movie, but it just doesn't work very well. I couldn't really get attached to any of these characters. They all share the collective same character arc of trying to forgive themselves for the mistakes they made in their past. One thing that I will admit is that despite seeing clips of this movie, I will wholeheartedly 100% confess it. I've actually never watched this movie, to tell you the truth. This might be the only X-Men movie I never saw. But, you know, I've seen clips of it and all that stuff, but it's like, it definitely has a unique spin on it, but it doesn't really seem like it's executed too well. But I can't really give a full opinion on it since I've never seen it, so I'm just gonna let him say what he's gotta say. Past and the people they accidentally hurt. And because of this, they're all on the same level of despair and they all feel very samey, which is incredibly silly to do, especially when all 5 of these characters are unique and should be more distinct from one another. It's also really bad because I think the casting is mostly pretty good. Maisie Williams is very fitting for Wolfsbane, Charlie Heaton is a great pick for Cannonball, and Anya Taylor-Joy gives a really fantastic performance as Magic. I will say though, the actors for both Danny and Sunspot weren't the best. Especially Roberto. He had a few really bad lines in this movie.
Danielle Moonstar.
The main story of this film had some serious potential. The kids are locked up in this facility, and Danny Moonstar's powers manifest in her, creating these nightmare scenarios for everyone else. But the story really doesn't do anything more than that. There's a bit of a character arc of Danny facing her fears and conquering her demons. All these characters are so poorly developed that any attempt at a character arc just feels rushed. Also, them being locked up doesn't work at all because one of them can teleport. Why doesn't Magic just teleport out of there? She's more than capable of it. In the comics, she can teleport to anywhere in the world, and there's no reason to believe that Dr. Reyes's force fields would be able to stop her at all. Also, the film's horror elements are pretty basic. I commend it for trying something different and trying to do a superhero movie of a different genre, but it just wasn't scary or suspenseful at all. What else? The demon bear fight was cool, I guess. The CGI was decent, and it was cool seeing each character use their powers on this huge bear. Yeah, there isn't much to talk about with this movie. It's simple, it exists, but it's not spectacular in any way. So I'm going to put the New Mutants in D tier. And just a heads up, there'll be no spoilers from here on out as we talk about the final film in this series. Deadpool and Wolverine. Me and the boys on the way to see Deadpool and Wolverine for the 47th time. Deadpool and Wolverine is maybe the most bonkers movie I have ever seen. This is the huge multiversal cameo fest many fans have wanted from Marvel, but it also has some touching character stories. Deadpool has a fairly well realized arc of transitioning from a mercenary to a full-time hero, and someone he could be proud of. And his family's life being in danger makes for a great central motivation for his character and his actions in the film. And Wolverine's story is even better. I can't really talk about it without delving into spoilers, but this is a different Wolverine from the one we know, which I found pretty interesting. And he has his own development that was very moving. And Hugh Jackman puts in some of the best acting work of this entire series. He is really phenomenal in this film. And together, Deadpool and Wolverine end their respective character stories. That monologue. All I gotta say is that monologue. All I have to say is that monologue, and people will know exactly what I'm talking about. You know the one where where him and Wade were inside the Honda Odyssey and everything, because you know Deadpool basically lied to him about being able to save his world and everything, which understandably made Wolverine very furious. Bro, that monologue where he just verbally ripped Deadpool apart was bloody fantastic, and bloody fantastic pretty much describes this movie in a nutshell. Bloodfest, it's fantastic and everything. I don't think it's the best X-Men movie, but I do think it's arguably the best Deadpool and Wolverine movie to feature both characters, like in the most accurate way. Because you got to remember, this is Marvel Studios with the creative input on doing this, on running things here. It's not some high-level Hollywood studio
interjecting and making changes to the shit, you know. But yeah, that monologue scene, and Hugh Jackman did a great job. He was fantastic.
One of the most spectacular,
as he always
memorable scenes of the entire franchise. Seriously, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It was glorious. The main plot itself, though, was kind of a jumbled mess. The characters just sort of went from place to place without any rhyme or reason, and the pacing was really all over the place. It seemed like the movie really wanted to dedicate a lot of screen time to cameo scenes and fan service moments, which in the context of a
that basically describes the whole movie in a nutshell. It's literally a fan service movie. That's basically what it is. It's basically an entire fan service movie that's not really strong on story at all. But the only thing it did was just introduce Deadpool and Wolverine into the MCU. That's the only thing and it gave us a Deadpool and Wolverine movie. Like, we get to see these two characters side by side. So it definitely is less strong on story and more strong on fan service, which is what gives it its appeal. But where this movie fucks up at is definitely its plot. It's lame. Although Emma Corrin as why can't I say her name? Jesus Christ, why is my head not working today? Jesus. She was amazing as why can't I remember the name? Jesus, hold on. Sorry, I had to look it up. I don't know what's going on with my brain right now. I literally don't know. Maybe I just need to go to sleep or something. But yeah, Emma Corrin did a great job as Cassandra Nova. She was fantastic. She was intimidating on top of it. She was very terrifying, and almost everyone was scared of her. And rightfully so, because, well, if you know, you know. Let's just say she did something really horrible to a very familiar fan favorite character and did it instantaneously without even breaking a sweat.
Film I think is fine, but it did sort of hurt the overall story. Also, I don't think this film was quite as smart as the original Deadpool films in terms of comedy. There were a bunch of funny meta jokes, of course, but I did find that some of the bits went on a little too long and started to lose me a bit. I mean, seriously, I can only hear Deadpool joke about Disney so many times. Although there was a Pinocchio joke in this film that gives Shrek 2 a serious run for its money. It's a thong! Sean Levy is the third director in the Deadpool series, and I think for the most part, he did a really solid job. Sure, the lighting and the color grading have been criticized a whole bunch, but his action scenes absolutely rip. There were a couple instances of shaky cam and some poor framing, but those are mostly pretty rare. I think for the most part, you can see everything perfectly fine. There is one fight that takes place within a Honda Odyssey, which is absolutely terrific.
Oh yeah, that fight that Logan and Wade had inside that Honda Odyssey was fantastic. The monologue and then the fight that happened, dude, it was just gold. That had to have been the best scene from the whole movie, besides the end.
Scene might be the highlight of the film. Also, all the action scenes make full use of every character's powers. Deadpool, Wolverine, Cassandra Nova, all the other characters who I can't talk about without getting into spoilers. But speaking of, Cassandra Nova is an okay villain. I think Emma Corrin gives a really fantastic performance, but the character herself has a really weird twist towards the beginning of the film's third act that I don't love. And again, I can't really say much without getting into spoilers. Something that is really hard to miss about this movie is the fact that the CGI looks really rough at times. Now, nothing looks as bad as the CGI claws in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh no, it definitely isn't that bad.
But some environments look really artificial, and some characters look like cartoons at times. I would guess this is because of the strikes last year, so the CGI artists had to really rush to finish the movie, but I really don't know. I just know that a lot of this movie doesn't look great. One of my biggest flaws with this movie is that Domino, Cable, and Russell weren't in the film at all.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with him. I was very disappointed by that because me personally, I was a huge fan of Cable and Domino. I think those two, I don't care what anyone says, those two characters are fucking amazing. I love Cable. I love Domino. I thought they were both amazing in Deadpool 2. I would have loved to see them return, but we never got that, unfortunately. And it's such a damn shame because they were amazing characters in Deadpool 2. Even more shameful was the fact that Cable and Domino were nowhere to be found in the New Mutants, despite being the leader of the New Mutants. But that's all.
All, which I think causes some issues because Deadpool's like, these people are my family, I don't care about anyone else. But according to Deadpool 2, Domino, Cable, and Russell are also his family. They really should be here, even if they didn't have any impact on the story. While I have complaints about the story and some visual effects, those problems honestly don't bother me that much. Deadpool and Wolverine, if anything, is a love letter to the Fox era of Marvel films. With all the cameos, costumes, and throwbacks, this is a celebration of the past 24 years of superhero cinema. And I'm obviously not gonna spoil who makes an appearance in this movie and who doesn't. Marvel has already done that in the trailers, but I found myself almost getting choked up as this.
Oh yeah.
Marvel has already done that in the.
Yeah, Daphne Keane right there. They did. I was like. And I remember too, Daphne Keane was literally trying to insist and tell everyone that she's not in Deadpool and Wolverine, but she was the one who brought Logan and Wade to their little hideout and shit. That was her, and she is indeed the same Lara that came from the universe where Logan died. She is the exact same one. This isn't like some sort of multiverse version of the character. It's literally the exact same Lara from Logan.
Trailers, but I found myself almost getting choked up as this film came to a close. I can actually say I grew up with the Fox X-Men movies, and it feels weird that they're finally over. And for better or worse, I honestly feel really passionate about this X-Men series, which I don't think I'll feel for the new MCU incarnation. The Fox era of films had a certain vibe to them, a certain factor of authenticity that I don't think we're gonna get from the MCU. In the past few years of hyper-polished super sludge is anything to go by, but who knows? Maybe this film is the end
why
of
would you
one
show
great
that?
X-Men series in the beginning of the next. So I'm going to put Deadpool and Wolverine in A tier, and that's the tier list. Of course.
That's fair. That's fair. So he puts it in the A tier.
Of the next. So I'm going to put Deadpool and Wolverine in A tier. And
that's fair. I'd say that's fair. You're putting it in A tier. That's fair. So that's another Nick's tier list and all that stuff. I already gave him a sub because it was a good video. The only thing that I strongly disagree with really was just his placement of Logan and Deadpool 2. That's like the only ones where I can safely say I strongly disagree. But the rest of his tier list, though, pretty good, pretty solid, and I thoroughly enjoyed the video. So his name is, again, another Nick. This isn't his only ranking movie that he's made. He also ranked the DCEU movies, which we might do at a later point, but I want to get to some gaming, so let's do it.